Ventura County is as diverse in its landscape as it is in its people. And that diversity should be reflected in its news. So, we're bringing Ventura County a broader view, exposing the often unreported side of global, national, and local issues, including coverage of issues happening here in Ventura County, with speeches, interviews, and documentaries from voices rarely heard on mainstream media. You're watching Maverick Media. Educate, organize, act.
Thank you for joining Pulse TV. I'm your host, Cindy Peister, and today we have a very special guest with us. Ofra is an Israeli Jew. She's also been a member of the military with Israel, and she's in the United States now on a speaking tour. Ofra, would you like to talk to us about that, and why are you here? Tell us about yourself and why you came.
Okay, I am a member of an Israeli feminist movement called New Profile. We're a movement for civilization of, we call ourselves the movement to civilization of Israeli society. We work very hard to bring into public consciousness the fact that Israel has become a very highly militarized society, and our activities obviously are of interest to people in the United States. We were invited by the RSN Center for Nonviolence in Santa Cruz to visit the United States and share with you a little bit of what we think and what we know about Israeli society and the situation in the Middle East.
Well, thank you so very much for coming. The United States itself is quite a militarized society in my view, and so I'm very interested. Can you give us some examples when you say Israel is militarized? Paint a picture for our viewers.
Okay. In Israel, every young person at the age of 18, if he belongs mainly to the Jewish religious and ethnic group, or as we call it, Jewish nationality, has got to join up. There is conscription in Israel, and one of the things that we do as a group, as a movement, is to say that people who do not feel that they are able to serve in the military should not be forced to do so. That's the first thing that we do. We do not. We see lots of young people who find this venue unsuitable for them, mentally or politically, and we give them support. We help them. We give them advice if they would not like to be soldiers, because we don't think that's the most wonderful way to serve your society. Moreover, we see our society as surrounded by emblems and symbols of which portray the army and the military in a very positive way. Maybe you see that in the States as well, but in our society it's very common. Children are being educated to adore and to wish to have a soldier's life from a very tender age, you would say from kindergarten's age. They dress up as soldiers, they play soldier games, they see their advertisements, and their whole surroundings are decorated with objects which seem to idolize the army and any military life. We take a very strong objection to that. We think this is not a way to educate society. We see the military as a violent way to solve political conflicts, and we think that by putting so much stress and importance on the military, our society is losing its perspective of solving its problems in more peaceful ways.
And you see that as someone who served in the military yourself.
Yes, but that was very long ago, as you can see. We served when we were 18, and that was very long ago. I went to the army, particularly I served in the military when I was about 20 to 22. I was I did my academic education first. It was an exception at the time. I think even at the time it gave me a perspective to look at military life in a different way than an 18-year-old would. Because 18-year-olds are very, very young people and very easily influenced by what they're told by their older and better ones.
And what was your experience in the military personally?
I had a very privileged military service. I served in the IDF spokesman, which is, the public relation wing of the army. So it was our job to portray, to let the public know the positive side of the army, all the achievements, but at the same time, I could sometimes see that we are making the reality perhaps much nicer than it actually was.
And so what was the turning point for you when you just decided, maybe I need to do the kind of work that you're doing now?
It is a very long process. I was educated as a Zionist, as a good Israeli citizen. It took me many years to realize where the problems of our society lay. I think that from the very start, I was 17 in 1967, and when Israel was able to come to with a victory of that very short war, we all were under the impression that Israel was attacked at the time and that we were under great threat, existential threat. But we, at least I come from a family that didn't think that this conquest of land allowed us to start settling and actually using those territories, vast territories that were occupied after the '67 war. We always thought the problem was that it was a mistake to start settling land, which actually was Palestinian land. At the time, I did believe in the prevalent narrative that this is only happening because we do not have partners for peace. It took many years to realize that there was something in the very nature of our society which prevents us from coming to terms with the people who are in the area and who are not of our faith.
And now you have a young daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And what is she being called upon to serve in the Israeli army? I would think she would be. Everyone is supposed to go, right? Right.
My daughter she was a member of youth groups who were. You see, there is a big difference in age between myself and my daughter. Today, you have many more organizations who work against the military and against the nature of the state, and she was from a very young age, not through myself, but through other friends of hers. She decided at a very early age, when she was 16, she knew that she would be 18, she would not want to be a soldier. She also, for her, it was very important to make a point of it. She didn't want just to, there are lots of ways that an Israeli woman can avoid serving the military. There are lots of stories you can tell, but she wanted to confront the army, and she demanded to have she wanted to be a conscientious objector and to go to a tribunal where she could prove her points against the army, which included her feminist beliefs, her general humanistic view of life, the army avoided this confrontation and just told my daughter, we don't need your services, after they've read her letter of refusal. So she never needed to defend her positions. The Israeli army is very reluctant to start ideological fights with people who really know that they don't want to be in the military.
So was your daughter's decision, was that partly out of your own growth or change of views? Is that how she came to that, or was that influenced you, or you both kind of came to that together?
As I told you, I was influenced by my own family background, and I'm sure my daughter was influenced by her family background. But she chose her own way, and she was actually an activist long before I was. I mainly concentrate on writing and on working, and it's only I always used to go to anti-occupation demonstrations, etc., but I was not part of an active organized body. But about 4 years ago, I was drawn into activity in New Profile, which is as I told you, this feminist movement. I'm also active in other organizations, and my daughter has her ways and circles where she's active. For example, she's very active on rights of foreign guest workers in Israel. She's active in alternative information centers, lots of things which I don't do, but I'm sure she's come from a kind of home that where she was allowed or encouraged to think for herself. This is part of the things we do in Your Profile. We encourage young people, we do seminars for young people, and the one thing we tell them is don't take what you're told for granted, just think for yourselves. I think would do good for young people everywhere in the world.
I think one of the things that's been encouraging that we've heard in the United States is that there are members of the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, that are what we would call refuseniks. They're saying, no, we don't want to do this. Could you shed some light on that for us?
Yes, have ever since, I think, 1982, that's almost 30 years now, but even back in the 70s, there were people who said they do not want to serve in the occupational forces, and they were always they took some punishment for that in some cases, in most cases. Back during the first Intifada in the year 2002, I think it was a letter of 30 fighter pilots who wrote to the Prime Minister that they would not agree to bomb residential areas in Gaza, that very strongly influenced the decision of then Israeli government to disengage from parts of Gaza which were settled by Israeli settlers. So yes, there have always been, you make the distinction between the people who already have been to the army, who have actually seen in their own eyes what happened. There are several organizations. There is an organization of Combatants for Peace, which is a combined, it's a joint venture of Israeli ex-fighters and Palestinian fighters, people who've been to Israeli prisons for what is called terrorist activity, and today they all want to find non-violent ways to work together for peace on both sides. There are other groups which are also supporting and promoting the views that soldiers who have seen acts against civilians which they would like to talk about, they come out and they publish it, and they try to make the Israeli society realize that we are engaged in policing a civil society, rather than in actual fighting. In my view, the Israeli army it's a very large organization, but its so-called enemies are mainly citizens who are trying to fight for their rights. We don't really have too many Arab armies up there to start a war on Israel tomorrow. On the contrary, most countries around us we have peace treaties with.
So how would you break down the society in terms of percentages? How many people in Israel would you say support your point of view?
A very small minority, I would say. A very small minority. I cannot say that we don't even talk about 5%, I don't think. There are many who are against the occupation. You will find more than half of the Israeli population, sometimes 60%, would be ready to give up the occupied territories. But I don't think that they all understand the extent of the problems within Israel proper. That it is not a coincidence that we are holding on to these territories, and they support the two-state solution. They believe that the reason we do not progress is perhaps because we don't have a partner. You would hear a lot of that, whereas there is a very small group that says Israeli society should look first to itself and not look out for another partner on the other side. And first we should make our own society more democratic, more equal rights, before we start saying that there is nobody on the other side to talk to.
I was at an event where you spoke yesterday, and you mentioned that there were suicides among the soldiers.
Yes, suicides as a cause, as you know, young people are a very small percentage, thank God, are suicidal. But in the army, in the Israeli army, in most years, the number one cause of death is suicide. So you have a few dozens suicide cases, and the army is very aware. In fact, they are trying to diminish that, which is one of the reasons they do not push. They don't put too much pressure on young people who say today that they don't feel mentally prepared to go into the army. But it's a very high. There were years that the rate of suicide was really high.
I have my own ideas about why that happens. It seems like, they've seen more than a human can bear. Would you care to venture as to why Israeli soldiers might be committing suicide?
I would say that in my age group, for example, you will find people who are members of the society who are still scarred from wars that they have experienced in 67 and in 1973 and in 1982. A war is a violent experience, and there is always a percentage, there is a good chance that having been in a violent situation, it would stay with you. It traumatizes you. It leaves a post-trauma. When we were kids, there were probably also here in the United States, there were people who were still shell-shocked from the Second World War. Wars are not a situation that humans should be in. It is not a way to solve conflicts, and it's a terrible experience to go through. Israel, unfortunately, is a society that still believes that a military force and fighting can solve problems. This is why we think this is a terrible way to run things.
I guess I would like to interject here that it seems like, to me, from my perspective, it doesn't really seem so much like a war. I mean, it seems like Israel has all of the technology, all of the power, all of the money. The United States, our own country, gives the country of Israel, I think, $7 million every single day for the military ventures there. So it doesn't seem like a war. It seems like a war, you have to have two more or less equal partners, but I see one very powerful and then one very powerless situation. Am I seeing that incorrectly?
No, as I said before, most soldiers today are involved in policing activities against civilian population. What I was talking about is people my age who were in wars against organized armies, perhaps in 73 or in other periods, and I'm talking about older people. But violence still goes on. A person would be in a violent situation, he would not care what the general political outlook is. It's enough that he was himself either stopping people or shooting at people or tear gassing people or whatever. He's still in a violent situation which would traumatize. We're talking about a soldier here. We're not even talking about the other side who get hit. I mean, God knows what kind of shell-shocked and traumatized people there are on the civilian side. which are on the receiving end of these actions. We're talking about the soldiers, the fighters, so-called fighters, who are really police people who are just violently trying to control a civil population or to harass it.
One of the things that's a concern to many people in the United States when they think about Israel and trying to solve the situation between Israel and Palestine is whether there is any hope for a two-state solution, or what is your sense of it? Is a two-state solution versus a one-state solution, or do you see any solution?
Well, I'm personally involved in groups which I have been saying for several years that the two-state solution today is not an option anymore. First of all, because there is no room for a Palestinian state, that's for one. I, for one, say to people who say, let's go for a two-state solution, because I don't like the nature of the Israeli state as an ethnic superiority state. I don't see why this should be eternalized in the two-state solution. What should we have? An Israeli state that discriminates in favor of Jews, and on the other side, a Palestinian state, which, what would they do? Discriminate in favor of Muslims or Christian Muslims or whatever? I think that, first of all, Israel should get its act together and become a real democracy and give an equal status for all its citizens. And I think this is why I keep saying we should look internally and get ourselves come to any kind of solution as a democratic society, and not to the society we are at the moment.
One of the criticisms that I've heard, and I know you've heard it as well, is that anyone who opposes what Israel is doing is anti-Semitic and really would just like to see Israel driven into the sea. Could you respond to that?
Well, I certainly cannot be described as anti-Semitic. I'm Israeli, and my concern is, first of all, with the people I live with. I think the Israelis are the first victims of our own prevalent ideology. I think the choice to make our religion equal to our nationality and to make very strict rules against anybody who is not Jewish was a very erroneous choice, a very lamentable choice. I do not think that I would certainly object to people targeting Jews in a violent way, but at the same way, I don't think that the answer to discrimination that Jews have been enduring in Europe or other places is to create a political entity which itself discriminates. This is not an answer to make a mirror image of what happened elsewhere.
So I guess what I'm suggesting here is maybe it's easier for you as a Jewish person yourself and from Israel to talk about the problems in Israel without being labeled as anti-Semitic. But for some of us who are not Jewish, to see the same things that you are seeing and talking about, and for us to discuss it, then we become ourselves targets of being labeled anti-Semitic. Does that resonate?
Yes, I've seen it happen. I don't know how I could help you, but when I hear Americans, even the state secretary saying we share the same values with Israel, I would recommend look at the values, look at the American values. Today you cannot have an Israeli political party run in the elections on a platform which equals the American Constitution. If you say that, you will not be labeled anti-Semitic. All you have to say is, couldn't Israel please allow a party that supports equal nationality? I belong to a group which is, for the last 12 years, have been pushing through the courts to force the Israeli legislate, allow us to call ourselves Israeli nationals, as opposed to Jewish nationals, Arab nationals, and other nationals. The Israeli registration Interior Ministry recognizes about 300 nationalities. It does not recognize Israeli nationality for fear of everybody would apply to be this nationality, and then you would not have the discrimination mechanisms that we have at the moment. For example, if you would support this kind of organization, so nobody could call you anti-Semitic. At the same time, you will be undermining the infrastructure of the Jewish state. This is how the state attorney has defined our action, which they're fighting in the courts.
A very frequent comment that I've heard is that if we oppose what Israel's doing in relation to the Palestinians, that we are actually calling for the end of the Jewish people, and that we are actually furthering the concept that Israel is going to be driven into the sea.
Israel has had a very aggressive settlement policies. Israel is been, for whatever so-called territorial needs, but it would be very helpful when you look at those settlements and those new buildings in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, like the latest controversy. First of all, you have to ask yourself, who is going to live in those settlements? And I suppose if those settlements were open to both Palestinians and Jews, then there would be no problem. So the discrimination is between the citizens of this land, and the Palestinians should be allowed to have equal rights, the same as the Jews. And this is the problem. And when you say that, nobody could blame you of being anti-Semitic. How could anybody blame you of being anti-Semitic if you demand equal rights for everybody who lives in the same country?
So we see in the United States that there has been a change recently in terms of our government's approach to your government, calling on Israel to stop the settlements. How do you experience that?
I find it interesting because I think that for the last 40 years, since 1967, I don't think the Israeli settlement policy would have been an option had it not been for American support. So this, I would rather return the question to you. Was it okay for America that Israel has been settling the West Bank and Gaza and taking whatever measures it was taking for so many years, and at the moment it's less convenient? This must be, looking from the outside, it must be some change which America is experiencing. It is not so much connected with what's happening in Israel.
Anything that you really want to convey to the American people?
It's not for me to tell you how to run your government, but I do like your president, and I do think that you're doing good things here. And the more caring and equal a society America would be, the better it would be for other areas. I think you have a few good things in this country, and your constitution is one of them, and I would be very happy if you would expect your allies, wherever they are, to adhere to the same values that you are supposed to be adhering to yourselves.
Wonderful. Ofra, thank you so very much for coming.
Okay.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Pulse TV.